Hey everybody, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I'm here to share my third masculine birthday card that I've made for my little mini masculine card series. This one is for my nephew who's turning 25 and he absolutely loves dogs. So I've been thinking about wanting to make him a dog themed birthday card. I'm going to share with you guys the whole process from start to finish, but I also wanted to first tell you guys the products that I used. I used a card sketch from MFT Card Sketch Challenge. I altered it a little bit to make it more horizontal in format rather than vertical, but the sketch is one that I followed and I will link to it in the description box below. Next, I wanted to make the card kind of more monochromatic and masculine, so I decided to do a bunch of pattern papers in kind of a scale of white to black, with lots of grays, and I wanted it to be warm in tone, but not really frilly or girly or too pastel-y, because I knew I wanted to make this a more masculine card. So first off, I used this alphabet stack glittered DCWB paper, and this was gifted to me ages ago by Priscilla, who's Priscilla Del Valle here on YouTube. Thank you so much, Priscilla. I love all of the various patterns in this paper collection. I found this paper and this paper in that paper stack. They're both plaids. One is obviously more bold and has like a glittery lines through it. And this one is softer and kind of almost more of a gingham. And then I just used a black cardstock card base and some white cardstock for the background to make everything kind of pop. For this sentiment here, I recently won a card challenge from CAS-ual Fridays. And this is one of the prizes that I selected. It's called Exclamations, and I absolutely love all of the different sentiments in this stamp set. Love the fonts, and I think that the sentiments are really very current. And I picked out Hot Diggity Dog to go with this card. For these little puppies, I picked this Penny Black Man's Best Friend stamp set, and I picked the 3 little puppies. And I didn't do any Copic coloring or anything. I decided I was going to make this really clean and use just some heat embossing. So I stamped this out with black ink and then used clear embossing powder to stamp these little puppies out. These 3 are the same puppies, and I just kind of shifted them a little bit here and there. And this are 2 different puppies from this stamp set. And then I took the butterfly from this little cutie patootie here and did that heat embossing with red ink. For the inside of the card, I used more of the pattern paper scraps, and I stamped out and heat embossed an extra little puppy. And the sentiment says, "Woofing you a happy birthday." And that is actually from the My Favorite Things Lucky Dog stamp set. And I picked out this sentiment to use for the inside. For the dies that I used, for this little frame here that I popped up, I used the MFT stitched rectangles. I used the 2nd to the largest and 3rd to the largest dies to create this little frame. And for the little scalloped edges on this background piece, I used the MFT stitched scalloped edges. I used the smallest little scalloped here to create the little kind of scalloped frame around the center part. I hope you enjoy the process video. Thanks for watching. The tiny puppies from the Man's Best Friend stamp set by Penny Black are so stinking cute. I am prepping these stamps with the oils from my hand to get the surface of the clear stamps ready for getting inked. And I'm prepping the paper with a powder tool so that I don't get stray embossing powder stuck to it unnecessarily. And I'm using Memento Luxe black ink. It's a Tuxedo black ink. And I don't know if my ink pad is a little dry or if it's just the way that this particular ink works, but I actually had to stamp this out 4 times to get a really clear, crisp black image. But luckily with a stamping tool, restamping isn't a big deal. And I got a really clean, crisp image on all of these little puppies. And I'm using clear embossing powder. It's just a Recollections powder so that I can get a nice clean finish. I poured the powder back into the jar because I had shaken off the excess onto a coffee filter, which doesn't, have the powder sticking to the filter. And now I'm using a heat tool, both the back and the front I'm heating, and that made the embossing really clean and crisp. And now I'm just hand fussy cutting out each of the puppies. I don't think you need to see me hand fussy cutting all of these and re-stamping more puppies. So I'm skipping over most of this repeated kind of stuff, but I just wanted to show you guys the basic steps that I went through. Next, for the sentiment on the front, I'm using this Casual Fridays stamps that has the greatest sentiment in my opinion. It says hot diggity dog, and I'm prepping the paper again with that powder tool, and I'm using more of that tuxedo black ink. This is a Memento Luxe ink, and again I'm having to stamp it over and over to get a dark black inking. That was, you got it, that's the 4th time I'm stamping out that sentiment. But in any event, it works. The ink stays wet long enough to do the embossing powder over top, and I'm recapturing the excess powder, and I'm using my heat tool both on the back and the front of this card base, or card front base, and you can see the embossing powder liquefying and going dark there. I love that kind of magical look. Now for this background plaid background piece, I have die cut the top and the bottom edge with a My Favorite Things stitch scalloped die, and I'm just using my ATG gun to adhere the card front base onto the card base, and I decided I was going to use a black card base because I thought that would nicely make the whole card pop a little bit. This background center area, I've used a MFT stitched rectangle die. I'm showing you the size there, and I'm using a paler gray, kind of a warm gray plaid. And then for that little white frame, I'm using the 2nd and 3rd largest of that same stitched rectangles die to make that little white frame. And I'm using some double-sided adhesive, and I'm cutting it in lengthwise because I thought it was a little bit too thick, but I want to use this adhesive to roll onto the back to give just a little bit of dimension onto this frame. I don't want it really popped up fully, but I do want it to have just a little bit of lift so that it adds a little bit of interest to this frame. And you see me there, I'm rolling it out on a craft mat because it doesn't stick. That surface of the craft mat helps the adhesive not stick to it. And again, I'm going to show you one more time how I split that double-sided adhesive, put it down on the craft mat, take off the release paper, and then just roll. So it gives just a tiny bit of dimension to that frame. And I do that to the last side as well. And then I place that frame around that center rectangle area. And I think that sets off the 2 different plaid pattern papers nicely. It sets them off from each other. Now for the little puppies that I've now fully fussy cut out, and I'm using Stampin' Up! Dimensionals to just add a little bit of dimension to these little puppies as well. I want the whole puppy to be supported, so I'm taking the time to actually cut out the foam dots into little tiny strips so that like the ears are supported. And I'm gonna have this first puppy who's leading the conga line, the dancing puppies, up front, and he kind of comes off the edge of the frame. And the next puppy is kind of hopping along behind him, as you can see there. And I do that middle section puppy, that one that looks like it's hopping. I actually have stamped and fussy cut out 3 of those so that it looks like they're all dancing in a line formation. And just to give it a little bit of variance, I am adjusting the angle of those little puppies, you know, just shifting a little bit here and there. The first one's vertical straight up and down. The next one's kind of tilted back. The third one is kind of tilted forward. And then the last puppy that I added there is the one that's sitting, looking in the opposite direction, distracted. And I thought this little puppy could be distracted by the cute little butterfly that was part of one of the other stamps in this stamp set. And I'm using some red Memento Luxe ink. I think this is called Love Letter, and it's a bright red, and I'm heat embossing this little butterfly as well. This tiny little butterfly is a little tricky to fussy cut out, but you know, just take your time and fussy cut around the little butterfly. And I'm also going to pop this one up on foam dots, or actually part of one foam dot because it's so tiny. And I use a this to that foam dot because I need a little bit more dimension since the puppy is up on top of the framed edge, which is also rolled up. This little butterfly had to be up just a fraction higher, so the thickness of this foam dot is a little bit higher. And that's the finished card front. So for the inside of the card, I used more of those scraps of the pattern papers that I had left over from the card front. And this liner sheet is getting a sentiment that's from an MFT stamp set called Lucky Dog, and it says, "Woofing you a happy birthday." And I had one extra little puppy that I thought would be a nice embellishment for inside the card. And that's my completed card. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day.